What's happening, my friends? It's the Cassius Show. Thank you for joining me for episode number 177. Steady pushing towards that 200 mark. And, I'm really honored. I'm just going to come out and say it. Really honored to have the guest that I have on this podcast today. Veteran broadcaster from TSN, Sportsnet, and a man who is, well, as he should be, well respected in the broadcasting and media community, Mr. Michael Landsberg. As I told him before we started rolling, because we did talk for a couple of minutes before the recording started, Michael Landsberg is really one of the first people that I saw on TV growing up that really made me want to start potentially even thinking about interviewing people. I saw the way that he jumped on there and had his own style. He had his irreverent attitude, and as I think he even says in this interview, sort of a smart-ass sort of character on the air, and he really just gave it a style that was so unique and something that I really hadn't seen before, and I don't really think has been recreated since. So it's just seeing his flair really sparked it in my mind that maybe there's a fresh, cool, interesting way to do this. Get on there and interview people and, not do it in a redundant way and really show your personality. So I credit Michael Landsberg for even helping plant the seed for me to start interviewing in the first place. So it's really an honor to speak with him on this podcast today. Not only that, we obviously delve deep into broadcasting, how he started broadcasting, some of the biggest failures he encountered in his early stages of it. But we also talk about his new campaign towards the end of this interview, and that's pretty much the last portion, called Sick Not Weak. So for anybody who hasn't heard of Sick Not Weak, it is his depression awareness foundation. Essentially, it's a nonprofit. They do a show every single day, which is a live stream show called Isolation Nation, and there's a link to Isolation Nation and all of Michael Landsberg and Sick Not Weak's social platforms in the link in the description below. But he does this, and it's basically just to raise awareness about depression in a way that is highly relatable and is just, it's a nonprofit. As I said in the interview, it's non-pretentious, and it's just really from the heart. So this foundation really helps, I think, encapsulate what depression really is and what it really feels like. And I think that's really important. And again, there's no financial motivation or anything like that behind it. So thank you, Michael Landsberg, for joining me on this podcast. Make sure to go check him out. And one more quick note, if you're watching the video version of this, when you're about to see the interview clip, these interviews are recorded months spaced out. I don't do it I don't record it and post it 2 days later. So in my last 3 interviews, I happen to be wearing the same shirt. And you're about to see it. It's the black long sleeve shirt. So listen, just as proof, I'm here in the intro. I wear different clothes. Trust me, this isn't the black long sleeve under it. I wear different clothes. This is all recorded, spaced out on different days, and I just wanted to add that in there. So without further ado, here is my exclusive interview with the iconic broadcaster, Michael Landsberg. Michael Landsberg, thank you for joining me on the Cassius Morris Show.
Thanks very much. I just asked you how to pronounce your name. I could have waited because you just said it, Cassius, okay? I see a veteran would have waited. It's a rookie mistake on my part.
Well, I thought I was the rookie here, to be quite frank with you, coming into the situation.
Yeah, and clearly when it comes to comparison, yeah. But notice I didn't say I was a rookie, but it's a rookie mistake. Because it's funny how obviously I was just kidding. Mm-hmm. But there is something about engaging people in banter that is not relevant to the topic that you're going to discuss, to put them at ease, to make them sort of feel like, oh yeah, he's just, we're just chatting, and it can make a huge difference with someone who's nervous. So yeah, I guess that's sort of tip number 1.
Wow, so we're getting tips right off the bat here. So
right off the bat,
this is stuff that you've found throughout your many years of doing interviews. I mean, you have so much experience. Most people know you from off the record, the sports stuff. How did you get started in this business? Were you always doing sports reporting?
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
I've always done it since I've done it, which sounds like, what the hell is he talking about? And you may say that actually from time to time, but I would explain it this way: that I was a guy who, through the first 2.5 years of university at University of Toronto, and previous to that for most of my life, the only thing I ever wanted to do really was talk about sports on television and radio. But I never thought you could do it. I thought, how you ever get a job? Because I didn't know anyone who had done that with their life. And then when I realized I was failing out of school, that I had nothing in my life that interested me outside of that, it was like, you know what? I got nothing to lose. May as well go for it. And
Yeah.
that lack of other options and opportunities and a safety net was the best thing that I ever had.
It was the best thing you ever had, because do you feel like it just pushed you right into the fire, so to speak?
Yeah, it did for sure. But also, you're not going to quit if you have nothing to quit to, right?
That's true.
It's like you're rowing a boat across the ocean, and if you quit, you die. So you keep going because you have no other options. Now, if you could find a motor, you would use it. If I could have found something, maybe that would have been an alternative, maybe I wouldn't have persisted when people told me I was crappy, or all the things that every young broadcaster hears. So the fact that I had no other options, and the fact that I had for up until that point in my life never really felt like there was anything that was mine. I never felt like, wow, you know what? There's this thing on the planet Earth that's me. It's for me. Whereas a lot of my friends, said, oh, I want to be a doctor. And that was there for them. But this was my thing. And the first time I did it at campus radio, I realized that my life was changed and that there was something, someplace for me.
Wow. So what campus were you on?
I was downtown. So I was at University College. And I just went there because everybody I knew was going there. My brother, who was 5 years ahead of me, went there, went to medical school. My buddies all went there because they wanted to be professionals at something. They wanted to be doctors or lawyers or dentists. Yeah. And I only went there because that's all I knew. But it clearly was the wrong place for me. And ironically, when I look back, the fact that it was the wrong place for me was the best thing that could have happened. Failure was the best thing that could have happened for me, because it forced me to go and take the challenge of broadcasting, that if I had had limited success, say in a different area, I probably never would have done it. But since I had nothing else, it was like, okay, may as well try to do
the
this.
Races, right?
Yeah.
That completely makes sense. What were the first sorts of big failures that you faced in your broadcasting career? I'm curious about that.
I think that every time, I mean, when you start off, typically you do up a demo tape and you send in the demo tape. And I remember I went for an audition to what was, it wasn't the Fan as of yet, the Fan in Toronto, but radio station, but it was something like that. I don't remember what their format was, but I went there. Yeah, something similar. And the program director at the time said, yeah, you're okay, nothing special. And I thought, okay, but that was a failure, but also just a reminder, but also a lesson. And I learned a lesson on that day that where you are is far less relevant than where you can go. So if you're trying to get to a certain place, if you're trying to climb up the ladder and it's 10 rungs and someone tells you, well, you're not at the top yet, then that's okay. As long as you think, I just started this. Like if I'd been doing it for 25 years at that point and had tried everything in my power to be able to improve a bit and couldn't do it, that would have been an issue. But it's also one person's opinion. Cassius, this is an industry that is all subjective, right? There's no right or wrong. There's really no good or bad. There's an interpretation of good or bad in performance. And, after all my years of doing this, and after the experience of doing Off the Record, and even Sports Desk before that, where I was a guy that some people liked and some people hated, I learned that, and I've said this to people, the haters, right?
I've seen you talk about this, yeah.
Yeah, I've said, you know what? You're not wrong. What do you mean I'm not wrong? I just said I don't like you. I go, well, how can I tell you you're wrong? You just said I don't like you. Well, the only way it would make sense for me to tell you that you were wrong if I thought you were just making it up.
Right.
You were just trying to be a dick. But
Right.
otherwise, it's opinion. I watch TV, I see people, and I like some of them, and I don't like some of them. And it's a tough part of the business for sure. And you need to develop confidence in yourself and a thickness of skin that will allow you to exist without being consumed by what do people think of me? Because in the end, sure, it matters whether your boss likes you, and it matters whether or not people will watch you or listen to you or read you.
Yeah.
But whether they like you or not is not relevant at all to your life. Like, who cares? Like, I know who I am. I always, had the perception of being arrogant, for instance. Like, I heard that every day of my professional life, from the first day that I was on TSN to probably yesterday. I heard that all the time. And it never bothered me, right? Because I know who I am. And here's a tip number 2, unless there were other tips. No, there were other tips in there. I just realized that.
There definitely was.
Yeah. But I'm going to categorize this one as tip number 2. Do not listen to what people say about you, which means that you can't listen to the good. Because if you listen to the good, if you see a heading on an email that says you're doing a great job, and then you read through it and you go, wow, I feel so good. And then there's a tweet that says you're doing a great job. Then you go, wow, I feel so good. So you start to embrace the idea that people's opinions count. And when someone says something bad, you're going to pay attention to it. If you are programmed to listen, you cannot filter out the bad. You listen to everything. So it's like,
wow.
Over my career, when I've had even articles written about me, right?
Yeah.
I mean, when you do it long enough, you're going to get articles written about you.
Mm-hmm.
I don't read them. I don't read them. I don't read, because I've learned that it doesn't matter how people interpret me. What matters is how I interpret me and whether or not I enjoy the process of doing what it is I'm doing. And it's hard to do at the beginning, Cassius, because what's your goal?
My goal really is to be an entertainer, like a host of shows. I have a passion for music. I have a passion for acting. So really, I look at the career model of a Will Smith or somebody like that.
How old are you?
I'm 21.
So when you're 21, which was, I guess that was the age for me that I went, whoa, wow, I really got nothing. And it's like, okay, so that's when I dove in and never got out. And I can remember the first day at University of Toronto Radio. I can remember pushing a button. It was a square, and it lit up when you pushed it to turn on your microphone. And I can remember it because it was most of the buttons in the studios that I've worked in didn't feel like this one. And I remember pushing it, and I remember the experience of talking for the first time. And I remember the exhilaration of, wow, this is the first time in my life that I've actually done something which could take me to a place that would be really important in my life. And, that never wore off for me. I still feel like when I get the chance to talk, as I'm doing right now, I still feel that excitement. So my advice to you, this would be number 3, suggested number 3, would be that find that button, the feel of that button in your life, and whatever that leads you to, whatever aspect of this industry is, you have to chase it, because chances are the thing that you want to do the most, the thing that you enjoy the most, is the thing that you will do best.
Yeah, absolutely. That's so valuable, and I thank you so much for that. It's true. I mean, I can so relate. The first time I tried this, it wasn't in a radio station. It was at home in a podcast format, and I was a really young kid. I started this when I was about 10, and just being a kid and having like adults just pay attention to anything I was saying on some sort of platform was my first thing. But it's obviously different for everybody, but it's that feeling, you're right, that makes you feel alive.
It is, but it makes you feel like you have a purpose, which for me was really a challenge. You know, the idea of like, oh God, I don't have a destination. You need a destination, right? You know, I mean, one of the things that I would ask you is if you said, well, I want to be the host of a TV show, how do I do that? Or if you say I want to be in broadcasting, for instance, how do I do that? And I would say, okay, well, you know, what's the dream job? And people are hesitant sometimes to say what the dream job is because it sounds like they're being arrogant, right? Like if they said, oh, you know, I want to replace Lisa LaFlamme on CTV News at 11 o'clock, they're afraid that would sound like they're saying, I'm good enough to replace Lisa LaFlamme. The point is that if you don't have a destination, how do you find your route? And the route in broadcasting is the toughest thing, right? You know, if you wanted to be, Cassius, if you said, I want to be a dentist, you would never go, I wonder how I can be a dentist. What do I have to do to be a dentist? Someone would say, well, clearly you're not smart enough to get into dental school because only an idiot would say, how do I become a dentist? But to become a broadcaster, to become a host, to become any of the things that you and I have, in my case, wanted to do or want to do, or your case, you look forward to doing it, any of those things has no one route to get there. And that's one of the reasons why this is so challenging. And that's one of the reasons why people fail, is because they just don't know what to do.
Yeah, it's so true. It's even though you can go to broadcasting school and you can do all that stuff and acting school, there isn't really a roadmap or a school for what you have to do from that point to get yourself there.
Yeah. I mean, the broadcast school idea is a great idea. I went to Ryerson for radio and television. That was like the biggest move for me, was when I was halfway through my third year deciding, okay, I know I'm going to fail out of this school. So I better chase what I wanted. And part of that was the understanding that I wanted to further my education, or at least begin my education, because I'd wasted 2.5 years at U of T. But there's something that I learned along the way, and I learned it really early. And the people that I went to school with, for instance, never learned it. And that is that being on the air, whether it's hosting a talk show, whether it's doing play-by-play, whether it's doing a music show, whether it's hosting 4 hours of radio where you're playing music, there's only one way to get better at it, and that is practice. And you need to understand, not you, one needs to understand that when one starts out, one is almost always really shitty. That it's impossible. Like if I said to you, do you play any music?
Yeah, I play the drums and picking up guitar.
Okay. So have you ever played the trumpet?
No.
Okay. If I said, here's a trumpet, play the trumpet, I would assume, unless you're like Stevie Wonder, you'd be pretty crappy at it, right?
Yeah, I'd say it's like a needle in a massive haystack chance, but absolutely you're right, yeah.
Right. So if you said, but I want to be a professional trumpet player, oh my God, I'm terrible at this. Oh my God, this is shattering my dreams. Someone, I hope, would say, well, you've never practiced. You've never taken lessons, like do it for 10 years every day, and I bet you'll be awesome at it. Yeah. So that's broadcasting, though. People assume because we all talk. We wake up in the morning and we talk. That's, fundamental to our lives and our ability to exist in an environment is that we talk. We ask for things. We communicate through words. Yeah. So why do you have to learn how to communicate through words as a broadcaster? And the answer is, I don't know, right? It's like, I don't know why, if you do a demo tape, or if one does a demo tape, I'm trying to stay away from you and just make it all of us, right? General, when I did my first demo tape. So here's the absolute truth. My first demo tape was crappy, but it was a better version of crappy than people who were around me in school, for instance, because I was blessed with a little more talent than they were blessed with. But what happened was, so I'm a little bit ahead of them, and they stay here because they think they're really good, right? They listen to their tape and they don't hear the flaws. All they think is, my parents told me I was really good. Well, parents always think you sound good. So it was like, okay, well, I kept working and I kept working, and they stayed here and I kept working and I practiced. And when I was driving in the car, I would talk to myself, and I volunteered at a cable station to do a call-in show where I got 2 calls in 90 minutes. And I went to campus radio and I did all of these things. So virtually every day, I went for voice lessons virtually every day. I was doing something to try to get better. And so at the end of 3 years at Ryerson, this group of people that I went to school with who all wanted to do sports are down here still because, like, why would they get better if they weren't practicing? And I was here. Now, I don't know being here whether that was being an awesome broadcaster or being, okay, pretty good. But I know it's a hell of a lot better than they were. And all you can do is maximize what you're born with, right? Like you look a certain way, you sound a certain way, you have a certain presence. Like there's a lot of things that just go into you, Cassius, right? Yeah. You can't change that. But the other half of the equation you can change. And the other half is how hard are you willing to work to maximize the genetic inheritance that you got from the way you look to the way you sound to your presence to your intelligence. All of those things you can't change.
Exactly. It's about working with and maximizing the cards you've been dealt, I think. And as you're right, like everybody's dealt different cards, but there's definitely things you can work with there.
It's true. It's you can't change your natural ability, so why worry about it?
Yeah.
But you can change your commitment to becoming the best you that you can become. Like you may have inherited genetically more good things than your buddy at school. Like if let's say you were in broadcast school. Are you in broadcast school? Are you in post-secondary? But
I actually did a program at NAIT here in Edmonton for radio and television, and I had a conversation with the professor, and he actually recommended that I jump straight into the field rather than fully enrolling.
Right. Well, that's quite the compliment. But
yeah, it was.
I'm not sure that necessarily I would have given you the same advice. Not because I would have heard anything or seen anything different in your presentation, but it's you're 21, and the issue is sometimes you just need time to mature, but more than that, for the industry to see you in a way that they may not see a 21-year-old. But that said, my point was that, so you go to school, and there's a guy that you go to school with, and you guys are best friends, and you have more ability than he has. All of the things that we just talked about, you can't quantify it. It's just something, like intelligence. Well, I guess intelligence you can sort of quantify, but you can't change who you are. And maybe you got lucky. So maybe on a scale of 1 to 10, if a 9.5 is, who's a great broadcaster or host? Just give me the name of somebody.
Strombo.
Okay, so maybe on a scale of 1 to 10, Strombo is a 9. And maybe with your natural ability, you could be a 9, but maybe you're a 6, right? Because I told you at this point, or at most people's point when they're 21 years of age, they haven't reached their maximum potential. Right. So maybe your maximum potential is 9, and the only way you get there is working hard. Maybe your buddy at school's maximum potential is being a 6.5. No matter how good he gets, he will still be limited by the sound of his voice, by the way he looks, by his, maybe he's not as smart as you. Creativity is also something that you're born with, all of these things.
Right.
So he needs to work just as hard as you did. Maybe his upper range is 6.5, but he's never going to find out if he can be a 6.5 unless he works his ass off to get there.
Right. Yeah, and you'll never find out exactly what that number is. It's just about you. It's up to you to find that out. That's a really good point.
Right. And there's only one way to find out how good you can be. And that is, it's true. Like, I don't know why it's not obvious. Well, I do know why, because we all talk, right? I mean, we all, as I said before, we all talk in our lives. So we just assume that, I've been talking all my life. Like, why would I have to learn how to talk? But broadcasting is while you talk to broadcast, it's not the same as when you're walking on the street. And that's why when people hear themselves, when they record themselves talking, they sound really dull, really lifeless, really unenergetic, really boring. And they go, oh my God, listen to how I sound. But that's because in everyday life, people are not measuring what we sound like, because you present all kinds of cues to them as well as what your voice sounds like. But you hear your voice and all of a sudden you go, oh my God, I just sound so flat, and oh gosh. And that's why you got to learn to push the boundaries of how you present yourself.
Yes, I completely agree. This is very valuable. I hope there's broadcast students other than myself also watching this, because there's a lot to learn here. Talking about off the record, so 21 years old, you're telling me about this hardship. You're working and working every single day to get to your maximum point.
Okay, let me interrupt you.
Yes.
Let me interrupt you, because it's one of the things I do best in life is interrupt people. Please. And that's one of the reasons why people go, shit, that guy, stop interrupting people. But, it's kind of like my belief in an interview setting is, depending on who you're talking to, right? I mean, there's some people, especially, I talk a lot about mental health. And if someone is telling you a story about their mental health struggles that you find to be really sort of dull and painful to listen to, not painful because of the story, but the way they're telling it. My instinct would be always to jump in, right, and try to speed it up or divert their attention. But you can't do that when someone's telling you an emotional story for them, right? You just sound like a dick. Mm-hmm. But if I'm interviewing you on Off the Record or on the radio show I host now or on the show that we do every day, a mental health show called Isolation Nation, and if you're rambling on about something, or if you're not answering the question I asked, you're damn right I'm going to interrupt. And if I seem like I'm rude, that's okay, because I think that I am the proxy for the person at home who's watching. Mm-hmm. And they want the truth, and they want the pursuit of the truth, and I'm willing to sound rude even to do it. So when you said, I'm trying to remember how you phrased it. You used a certain word. I was 21 years old, and I was. Did you use the word?
I said working towards that maximum point.
Right. I think you used the word struggling. I think that you made reference to it. And the reason why I wanted to interrupt you was I want to say, the struggle at the time may seem like a struggle. Mm-hmm. But when you look back at it, it was, in a lot of ways, the most exciting time of your life, because the unknown that exists, the idea that you go, like, am I going to get to do the things that I want to do? That when you look at it after the fact is one of the most stimulating things, right? Like think back to, are you a Raptors fan?
I'm a bandwagon type of guy. I got to say right now, I was digging it.
So you look back at the Raptors and you think, wow, I was so nervous, when they were, when it was clear that when they advanced to the finals, and then they took on Golden State, and then in Game 6 they're winning, and then all of a sudden Danny Green turns over the ball, and they've got the ball. Steph Curry's got the ball, and he's got a shot at the basket to force a Game 7 in Toronto, and I'm dying, right? I'm dying at the time. I'm going, oh my God. But I look back at that and I think that was the best thing, right? Because of the uncertainty, the unknown, the thrill, the risk. That, in a lot of ways, is one of the best things in your life. And if you don't take risks, if you don't challenge yourself, then you never get the satisfaction of being able to say, you know what, I faced my fears and I went and I did it. And even if you fail, you are better off failing than you are never trying. Being safe and comfortable will never give you the satisfaction of being able to say, yeah, you know what, I could have quit. I could have stepped back. I could have avoided that situation where I was on stage and I had to perform, but I didn't. And even though I didn't get the job, or even though I didn't do a great job, I'm still really proud of myself for doing that.
100%. And I think it's important that you added that, because it is important not to downplay the build-up as just a struggle. It's actually, you're right. I mean, there is a lot of fun in it. When you, and I guess not everybody who hasn't gone through that could relate, but I can certainly relate because I'm in it now, and there's a lot of fun that I have.
Let me tell you that in life, I have found that the best thing in life is not arriving at the destination. The best thing in life is the journey to get there. So while you may say, oh my God, like the best thing would be to have this job, whatever it is. And if you get to that point where you get the dream job and you're doing the dream job, you may look at that and say, I love my job, but fighting to get this, fighting to get better, fighting to build confidence, fighting to ignore what the rest of the world is saying, that was actually the most fun I've ever had in my life.
Wow, that's incredible. And do you feel like a lot of creatives take that for granted too much?
Yeah, I do.
Mm-hmm.
I do. And one of the things that you need to always say, no matter how far you go in your career, you need to realize that unless I'm trying to think of somebody who would be irreplaceable. But most people are replaceable, right?
Mm-hmm.
I would say 1,000 times over the course of Off the Record, I said the words, I'm really lucky to have this job. And I'm not saying that I'm not doing a pretty good job with it, but there's lots of people who could do a pretty good job, but I'm the one that's lucky enough to have it. Because if you think the world owes you something, if you think you are owed that job, if you think that you're so good at it that no one else could do it, then you're missing the point.
Mm-hmm.
And you're probably missing out on a lot of joy. The fact that you would say, I'm lucky to have this job, which is not disrespecting yourself, which is not saying, oh, God, I'm not very good, but I got this great job. It's saying, I bet you I'm not the only one on the planet who could do this.
Yeah, not that you don't deserve it, but just that you're very grateful and you're happy to be there, right? Yeah.
You're happy to be there. You're very grateful. And you understand that there's others who could do it. But you're doing it, so you should be appreciative of it. That doesn't mean that you should walk away from it and say, well, I want to give somebody else a chance.
Right.
No, it just means that you realize that you are fortunate to have had the opportunity to do this. And, so much of what we accomplish in our lives is dependent on, like I said, your natural talent for anything, your willingness to work hard, but also the opportunities you get in your life, right? I'm a guy who suffered from an illness called depression, and I've done pretty well with it. And if I think it's because I have being really strong enough to pursue the help and ignore the fact that, I came from an upper middle class family. I've made a good living in my life. I've had people around me that loved me from the time I was born, with my parents to my wife and to my kids. I've had every advantage that you can have in life. If I make the assumption that didn't play a factor in the things that I've done in my life, then, how arrogant do you have to be to say, oh no, sure, I had a lot of advantages, but I didn't need them. I mean, a lot of people don't succeed because they don't have the support system, because they don't have all of the things that I was lucky enough to have that I did nothing to accomplish. A lot of people just, look what's going on. Do you watch CNN ever?
I've been paying attention the last couple of days. It's hard not to.
Yeah. So when one looks at an African American, who's marching in Minneapolis and is kicking a police car, or I'm trying to think of other things that went on that weren't like ridiculously hostile, but doing stuff that you go, okay, if you think you would not do that, if you think that if you were an African American in Minneapolis, St. Paul, if you're thinking, yeah, you know what? I wouldn't be down there because, I would have gone to medical school, or I would have done this or that, then you're missing the opportunities that you have had and how relevant that is to your life. And, how many millions of people are there that are unemployed in the United States, now? Because of the pandemic.
Countless.
Yeah. And how many people before the pandemic were making $7.25 an hour? Can I honestly say that if I wasn't born into the house that I was born into, with the that I had, with the opportunities that I had, that I wouldn't be one of those people?
Let me ask you this. How long did it take you to get to that point mentally? Is that something you have always had?
I don't know. I don't know. It's most things don't hit us like an epiphany in our lives, right? It's not like, I use this in the context of mental illness. Mental illness doesn't typically hit you like a baseball bat hits you, right? Yeah. If someone came up to you, Cassius, broke into your room right now and hit you across the chest with a baseball bat, you wouldn't think, what happened? I have a pain in my chest. But like, for instance, depression usually happens just with a tiny, minuscule change in you that happens over the course of every hour of every day of every month for 6 months. And it's so slight that you don't notice it happening. And then one day you go, wow, I think I've really changed. And I think that the evolution of what we think is also the same thing, that we don't all of a sudden go, oh my God, it just hit me.
Right.
It's like little changes in you that add up to a different way to see the world and a different way to see yourself.
This is true. I think I saw a great comparison that you made of it to like a bathtub. When the bathtub goes cold, it's not like you felt it going cold. You just feel it when it's cold.
Yeah, I was going to say it's a really good thing, and then I realized, wait, that's my line. So if I tell you that's a really smart line, then I'm actually boasting about it. But
no, it is a smart line. That hit me like a ton of bricks because I am diagnosed with clinical depression, and I also do broadcasting. So watching your TED Talk and watching your perspective about being on camera with depression and stuff was really moving to me.
You know, that's it's a big game of tag you're it, because I was it. Now because you heard me say something that allowed you to look at yourself in a different way.
Yeah.
Now you have that same ability to tag somebody else in, and it's amazing how with mental health and with depression in particular, that just hearing someone speak about how it makes them feel can be empowering to somebody who goes, oh my God, I was listening to Cassius speak, and he was talking about how depression has affected his life and the symptoms that he experiences beyond the stuff that you would read on the internet. Loss of appetite, inability to sleep at night, sleepy during the day. But really, what does it do? And what it does for me is when I'm off stage waiting to go on to stage, say, and give a speech, or in the days of Off the Record, if I was at my desk waiting to go to the green room, it sucks the confidence out of me. It sucks the belief in myself out of me. So now I resort to all kinds of panic situations because I'm going, oh my God, I can't do this. Yeah. That's what depression feels like. The loss of self-esteem, and the loss of self-esteem is universal. So if someone were to hear you saying that, they would go, I'm understood. Now, you're in Edmonton, right?
I am, yeah.
Or Edmonton, Canada.
Edmonton, Canada. We got to make the distinction, of course.
Yeah, because God knows a guy in Toronto would never know Edmonton, Canada. I was speaking in Edmonton, I think 2 years ago, and after I was done speaking, a woman came up to me and she was sobbing. And this was, I don't remember what it was. It may have been a workplace thing. It may have been speaking to a union. I don't remember what it was. Mm-hmm. And I said to her, obviously you're very emotional, take some time to compose yourself. I'm not going anywhere. I'll stay here until you feel like you can say what you want to say. Yeah. And then she came up to me, a couple of minutes later and went, I said, well, why? What are you having trouble saying? Why is it difficult for you to say? Because that will explain what you're feeling. She went, I feel understood for the first time. And it was like, wow. How did that happen? And the answer is all I did was talk about how depression made me feel, right? And she hears that. She knows that 10% of the population may suffer from it, and 5% of the population may be devastated by depression. But people don't typically say what it does to them, what it means to them, what it feels like to them. They just say, I have depression. Mm-hmm. What empowered her to come up to me was just the fact that I was going into way more detail than others. And she realized, you know what? That guy is feeling the same things that I feel, which meant that she felt less alone, which meant that she felt less hopeless because she knew that I had done pretty well with it. So it's not just the power of saying, hey, I suffer from depression. It's the power of saying, this is what it does to me.
Right. That makes so much sense because like you said, you look it up online and there's like you say, loss of appetite and stuff, but they don't really talk about the specific personal feelings. And of course the feelings are different for each person, but the theme is similar, loneliness, stuff like that. So I think it's, like I say, incredible. So how long have you been doing Sick Not Weak program?
Well, 2009 on Off the Record, I interviewed a hockey player named Stéphane Richer.
Okay.
I had never spoken about depression on TV, not because I was ashamed or embarrassed, but because I thought nobody would care. I thought, like, why would people care? What would be the benefit? I was so ignorant of the stigma that it never occurred to me that if I went on television and used that platform that I was given and said, I have this real struggle with mental health that I've had for the last 10 years. And some days, doing this show has been incredibly difficult for me because I had no belief in myself and everything was kind of a fake. And while you may perceive me as being arrogant, if you knew the existence that I have lived quite often over the last 10 years, that's the last thing you would think. Mm-hmm. So I never knew that just saying that could save somebody's life. And then Stefan Richer was a guest on the show. I knew he had suffered from depression in the 1990s. I said to him, hey, Stefan, would it be okay if I asked you how you're doing? And he said, I'd rather not talk about it. It's very painful. And I said, well, if you'll talk about it, I'll talk about it. And he said, you? And I explained a bit about me. We went on the air. We talked for 90 seconds. The next day, started getting emails to the show. All 20 out of 22 were from men, and they all said the same thing. It was the first time in their lives they've seen two men talking about depression, period. But the fact that we weren't ashamed and embarrassed and we didn't seem weak empowered these 22 people to write to me to say, your strength in talking about it. And I wasn't talking about it. I think it was carefree. I think it was being flippant about it, which was, hey, Stefan, me too. I understand how you felt because, hey, I felt the same way. Right. Because I acted like it wasn't a big deal, which it wasn't a big deal for me because, as I told you, I never feared that. Mm-hmm. I think other people went, wow, like he's not making a big deal of it, and he sure as hell doesn't sound weak. Yeah. That's when Sick Not Weak started. I was giving a speech somewhere, and I remember where it was at Mount Sinai Hospital in Toronto. I was giving a speech to a group of young people that supported Mount Sinai Hospital, and I was in a lecture hall, so I was down at the bottom, and it was angled pretty steeply, and I remember saying, and this was one of the first times that I spoke about this. I remember saying, I'm kind of disappointed that nobody here is actually speaking up and taking the other side. Nobody's here who's really talking about the way the majority of Canadians feel, and that is that mental illness is not the same as physical illness. I said, so someone, come on, challenge me. And this one guy said, okay, I'll do it. I think that, mental illness is different than physical illness. I think that, I'm not saying it's easy, but I think that, if you tried a little harder, Michael, you maybe wouldn't feel the way you feel. And I went, thank you. Thanks for saying that, because now we can debate it and others can hear your argument and my argument. And we did that. And I said, look, I'm sick, but I'm not weak. And because this was probably 8 years ago, I don't really remember what my thinking was at the time. Did I go, oh, wow, I should write that down? Right. It just kind of stuck, and people repeated it back to me. And then I realized that if you can name your charity or your cause, if you can give it a name that has meaning to it, as opposed to the name of an illness, say, if you said, okay, we're Canadian Mental Health Association, right? Yeah. CMHA, which, I'm not disrespecting the CMHA. They do a great job. But the name itself doesn't make you go, wow, yeah, that's,
There's no passion I'd get behind in the name. That.
Yeah, and it doesn't make a statement, whereas Sick Not Weak does. Now, people may not agree with it, but, it's kind of like if I got in front of a group of people and I only said, I'm sick, I have depression and anxiety, and I'm on medication, and I will be on the rest of my life, and it's taking me down. I'm sick, but I'm not weak. And then said, goodbye, everybody. They might go, well, that was kind of weird that he would only speak for 20 seconds, but there would be a valid point in there.
No, most definitely. And I think it's such a great thing, getting out there and letting people know. And it's in such an unpretentious way. There's so many mental health groups and stuff and things that it just rubs me the wrong way, and it doesn't seem genuine. And this is just genuine and from the heart, frankly. And that you don't have to be doing this, man. Like you've had an incredible career. You've touched so many people through your shows, and so I just think it's fantastic. So before we wrap up, I just wanted to touch on a couple real quick statements here that were sent in by some people. Somebody wants to know about off the record, when you're interviewing people that you've become friendly with, What's that like? Like, is there an element of sort of busting balls on the air when you're friends with someone?
Sure, although I think one of the things that I developed over the course of 18 years, for instance, of doing off the record, was the ability to create a bond with guests that was disproportionate to the amount of time that we'd spent together.
Mm,
Meaning, for instance, on Friday on Isolation Nation, which is kind of like off the record for mental health,
yes.
it's kind of got the same smart ass irreverence to it, the same sometimes obnoxious host, and the same sort of cross section of guests. And I was interviewing Nate Thompson. Nate Thompson plays in the NHL, plays for the Philadelphia Flyers. He's been a 10-goal scorer most of his life, but he
Right.
was an alcoholic, and he's been sober for. Trying to remember how many years. I've spoken to so many alcoholics on the show that I can't
Right.
remember how long people have been sober for.
Fair enough.
But I'd never met him before. And he did our interview at 5 o'clock on Friday from his car. He lives in California. He's waiting to come back, obviously, and play when hockey returns.
Yeah.
And so I think I spoke to him from 4:50 to 5 o'clock before we went on the air, or when we went on the air. Mm-hmm. So 10 minutes with him and another guest as well. So, I mean, how many things could I really have said to him? But by the time we got on the air, I think he thought, Landsberg's a good guy, like he's doing this for the right reason. He's not patronizing me. He doesn't see me as a freak, and he's asking me questions like I feel like, oh my God, this guy thinks I must be a loser.
Right.
Yeah, I think he just thought he's a pretty good guy. And therefore, he understood that one of the ways one of my styles is that, I'll be a smartass, right? I'll take what he says and go, oh, really? So, and poke fun at him. Mm-hmm. But also he knew that he could poke fun at me. And it's difficult to describe, but you can create a bond in people that goes way beyond the amount of time that you've spent together. So you can actually treat each other like you might treat or be treated by a good buddy. Like, as you say, the challenge is not, can you bust balls with your good friend? The question is, can you do it with a stranger? And to do that, you need to, first of all, you need to develop the confidence.
Yeah.
Second of all, you need to develop the resiliency of thinking, okay, well, every once in a while, somebody's going to hate it. And somebody's going to hate me. And they'll go, like, why would you say that or ask that? And, 99% of people would go, I'm just trying to have fun. Yeah. But then there's 1% that goes, you know what?
Right. So you can get both pretty much.
Yeah. Yeah.
That certainly makes...
it's just, if you don't take some risks also, then you never get anything really, really good. But also it's knowing yourself. What do you do well? Cassius, what you do well and what I do well. Oh, one sec. Can I take this?
Please,
it's my wife.
We'll edit
Take care. Yeah, I'm still on with Cassius. You better not be disrespecting Cassius. Okay. Okay, thanks. Bye. I won't have my wife disrespecting you.
No problem, my man.
And what I just did there also, I love that when I interview someone and their dog is barking in the back or their phone rings. And even like on Off the Record, I remember a million times where someone's phone rang and it's like, no, answer it.
Yeah.
Answer it, please. Like spontaneity. I mean, like his life's so formal that when I see and hear that my phone's ringing, that I go, I can't answer it right now. I think that's what you, in most situations, you want to engender in your guests, is the feeling that this is not fake life. This is real life.
Right. That's such an interesting balance when it comes to being your on-air personality and being that professional self and using your techniques and having the natural conversation. And that's really what I love about this art. It's just such a fascinating thing. Looking back at the guest list, I mean, you've had some crazy interviews, some heated interviews, people have walked out. Is there any standout moments or favorite guests? And it could be because it went good or because it didn't go good.
I think that, when you've done it for a while and you've done so many, there's some of the best things I've forgotten, right? Like someone asked me a question a couple of weeks ago and they said, well, how about this, whatever show it was? And I went, oh my God, I forgot about that. I love that guy. Mm-hmm. So, I think that there's an interviewing crush that you get on a really good guest where you go, God, I love her or I love him because of the rapport we've established, because they're giving really good from the heart stuff. And so I think there's a whole bunch of ones that are tied for first place. And then there's a whole bunch of ones that are probably at the bottom. And those aren't necessarily the ones where people got super pissed off at me, because super pissed off can make for really good television or radio or social media, whatever it is.
Yeah.
It can be pretty good as long as the guest doesn't opt out. As long as the guest isn't giving you two-word answers, that is just uncomfortable and embarrassing for everyone. But heated debate, real anger can be awesome. So for me, the most part is just if someone's got passion for the topic, whether it's mental health or whether it's sports or politics, then it's going to be good. And if they don't, no matter what they're saying, it's probably going to be crappy.
That's a very good point. Lee Conrad wants to know, who is the most genuine wrestler you've ever interviewed?
You know, I would say, Lee Conrad, that there would be a group that would fall into that category, because from my experience, the two most interesting groups of people would be wrestlers and enforcers in the NHL. And I have had interviews with half dozen enforcers in the NHL in the last 3 weeks, because they often have a story to tell. They often have an ability to tell the story. They have a humility that stars don't have. And they've always really, they made their living. They made their life from a work ethic and from a commitment to the other people around them. And they tend to be highly intelligent, even though you think he's a fighter, he must be dumb. And wrestlers need so many different levels of intelligence. You know, they got to create these characters, and then they got to create promos off the top of their head. So I think that almost all of them have been really, how did he phrase the question,
He
Conrad?
said the most authentic.
Yeah, most authentic. Bret Hart was always super authentic with me. Bret Hart's very shy, and it's a weird experience interviewing somebody who has been at Wembley Stadium in front of 75,000 people, grabbed the microphone, and yet you're going, wow, you know, he's shy. So Bret, I really liked. I mean, this was years ago, but The Undertaker, Mark Calloway, he gave us one of the only shoot interviews that he's done where he talked out of character. You know, we talked about football beforehand. You know, so I wasn't talking to The Undertaker. I was talking to this guy, Mark Calloway. I would say that, I mean, there's some guys that you never get 100% away from the character, like Chris Jericho, who I love, but you know, you're getting like 80% Chris Jericho and 20% whatever character he's playing. Same thing for The Rock. The Rock seemed like a great guy, but never totally out of The Rock says. So I going through a list of guys that I would say that The Undertaker or Mark Calloway would be the most genuine guy. Bret Hart, Owen Hart. I don't know. Are you a wrestling fan?
I'm actually casual. Like, I'm more into wrestling than most other sports.
Right. So Owen Hart was Bret Hart's brother. They just did a documentary. He died one night on a Sunday night pay-per-view, and he fell from the rafters. And I had interviewed him, I don't know, like 3 months before that. And I remember him telling me, you know, I'm not like the rest of these guys. You know, I'm not a lifer. You know, I have other things that I want to do. I'm not attached to this sport. I'm just here doing this because I can make a really good living at it. He said, you know, so you will see me doing something else. And it was like, well, how tragic is that?
Wow.
So wrestlers typically, though, are really smart, really interesting, really good.
That's really, I actually had no clue what they were like. I've never interviewed a wrestler, so that's really fascinating to know. The last topic I wanted to touch on, we were talking of wrestling. I enjoy wrestling, and I'm becoming a big fan of the UFC. What are your thoughts on the UFC airing without an audience and going through the lockdown? And what are your thoughts on potential other sports doing shows without a live audience in the building?
There's really not much to it if you think about it. I mean, this is the only way they can come back. So it's not like they're saying, okay, well, we don't need an audience. What they're saying is we're better off coming back and performing without people in the crowd, without people buying tickets, without the energy that they generate. Even though that's far from perfect, it sucks, as a matter of fact, but it doesn't suck as bad as not doing anything at all. So it's desperation. Okay, well, if we can't have an audience, we still want to come back, but we won't have anybody in the crowd. Whether or not other sports are able to pull it off, I don't know. I'd like to think that hockey will come back. I like to think that the NBA will come back, but there's so many things that have to fall in line, including the improvement in our society, in our world, in our cities of the pandemic. If we take a turn for the worse, if there's a second wave of this, then sports isn't coming back. And if nobody knows what happens if you're in this bubble where either all the teams are under the bubble, or in the case of hockey, I guess 2 or 4, I'm not sure, are under the bubble. What happens if somebody tests positive,
Yeah.
So there's a lot of unknown.
There definitely is. Yeah, well, it's going to be interesting to see how it unfolds. And Mr. Landsberg, again, thank you so much for your time today.
Why'd you call me Mr. Landsberg?
I don't know. Formality.
Yeah, did we not establish the fact, one of the things that everything's a lesson, right?
Yes.
One of the things that I find with a guest, and you got to read the guest, right? Yeah. I remember I was giving a speech in Ottawa where I was hired to give a speech and to hand out these mental health awards. Mm-hmm. And it was the Governor General, David Johnston, who was putting on this event. And I got up there and I thought, because I'd spoken to him before, going up there, and he seemed like a lovely guy. And, I asked him about sports to see, was he interested in engaging me on a human level, or was it just that, I'm up there, emceeing his event? And I realized that he was just a normal good guy. So I got up there and said, look, I know there's like names I'm supposed to call you, Your Highness or His Excellency or whatever. I go, I'm just not a Your Highness kind of guy. So I'm going to call you really good dude, because you are a really good dude. And I could see him, like, he's looking at me and he's beaming, because I'm just treating him like one of the guys, and I'm not. It was like he loved that, but it was a risk on my part, right? When you have a guest on your show and you want to push the boundaries and find out, what are they like? Sometimes the best way to do it is with what you refer to them as. And, if you call a guest Mr. Landsberg and he doesn't correct you, that's kind of a giveaway that there is always going to be a barrier between the two of you. But if you can push it to something else, you can find out, do they have a sense of humor? So it just, everything is about a feeling out process. Everything is about pushing boundaries. Everything is about how much you've practiced. And most of all, everything is deciding, what's my destination? Where do I want to get to in my life? What's the top of the ladder? And once you figure that out, you can start to climb the ladder.
That is incredibly meaningful, and I will take that to heart 100%. Well, Michael, I very much appreciate it, and thank you for joining me. I'm just a little pissed that you're 21 and you're really good at this. I notice, even though I'm looking at the camera right now, I can see you, obviously. And you look down at your notes, I think only at the very end when you look down, because you were reading what people ask questions, right? Yeah.
And I thought, okay, you know what? That's what an interviewer is. An interviewer learns about the person they're talking to, learns as much as they can, jams it in their head, then starts with a decent question, and then follows wherever the interviewer is taking you. Because people almost always, with their answer to your first question, will give you something that you should ask for your second question. So you did that. You weren't looking at your notes. You were looking at me and listening to me. And that is rare confidence for anybody, but also for a 21-year-old.
Oh, well, thank you so much for that. That really means a lot to me. Yeah, and I've been working really hard on trying to do that. So, again, thank you. That really means a lot.
Hey, you know what? Well-deserved. So keep in touch. Keep me posted. I'm a big fan of yours now, so I want to know. I want to know how you're doing.
And there you have it. My exclusive interview with broadcast veteran Michael Landsberg. I thank him so much for his very kind words at the end. Honestly, I was nearly speechless at the feedback that he gave me, and I'm greatly appreciative of it. And not only that, I will be taking all of the interview tips that he gave me and implementing them moving forward. I greatly appreciate that. Make sure to check out Mr. Landsberg's. Here I go saying Mr. Landsberg again. After all that, really? Check out Michael Landsberg's social media pages, Sick Not Weak, and of course the Isolation Nation program, which airs almost every single day live. Make sure to go and check that out. Also, if you enjoyed what you saw here, please make sure to click that subscribe button in the very bottom of this video and click the notification bell to be notified whenever we post a new video or go live. Definitely appreciate you guys' support, and also make sure to hit my social media if you want to keep up to date with what's going on the channel day by day. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time, this is Cassius Morris saying, rock on.